Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
So will it happen? Can it happen? President-elect and former President Trump had a marathon press conference yesterday at Mar-a-Lago and said some fun things, but said some serious things as well. And I don't know what's hyperbole, what is actually going to happen, but this is what he wants to have happen.
Mexico's really in trouble, a lot of trouble. Very dangerous place. And we're going to be announcing a future date pretty soon. We're going to change because we do most of the work there and it's ours. We're going to be changing sort of the opposite of Biden, where he's closing everything up, essentially getting rid of $50 to $60 trillion worth of assets. We're going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, which has a beautiful ring that covers a lot of territory. The Gulf of America, what a beautiful name. And it's appropriate. It's appropriate. And Mexico has to stop allowing millions of people to pour into our country. They can stop them. And we're going to put very serious tariffs on Mexico and Canada, because Canada, they come through Canada too. And the drugs that are coming through are at record numbers. Record numbers.
So if you listen to the entire press conference, it sounded like he suggested that he could use military to seize Greenland and the Panama Canal and annex Canada, and he could do it by economic or military coercion. And this, of course, happening less than 2 weeks before taking office. Here's why he wants to take over Greenland.
You have Russian ships all over the place. We're not letting that happen. The people are going to probably vote for independence or to come into the United States.
And the Panama Canal, because he says the Chinese are all over that.
China's at both ends of the Panama Canal. China's running the Panama Canal. And they come to see this Biden, this guy who should never have been allowed even to run for president. Of course, she shouldn't have either, because that never happened. I had to be two people, not one. But they want $3 billion to fix the Panama Canal that's run by China and makes a lot of money, China. One of the most profitable structures ever built, because you have your ships lined up back to Florida, frankly, and they just keep going through, and the numbers are staggering, $500,000 to $1 million a ship. And they took it away from us, meaning we gave it to them for $1. But not going to happen. What they've done to us, they've charged us, they've overcharged our ships, overcharged our Navy. And then when they need repair money, they come to the United States to put it up. We get nothing. Those days are over.
Does he have a point? Will he do it? With that, let's welcome to the program Brent Sadler, Senior Research Fellow for Naval Warfare and Advanced Technology for the Heritage Foundation. Good morning, Mr. Sadler. How are you?
Doing great, and good morning.
Good morning. So, is it true ships are lined up all the way to Florida, and they're overcharging us to go through the Panama Canal?
Well, it's not like I-95 here in Virginia, in the D.C. area, like back-to-back bumper traffic, but there is a queue, and whenever you have a shock to the shipping system, it gets exasperated. They had low water problems, partly driven by drought, but also design problems when they did canal expansion. That caused a backlog as they had to reduce the amount of transits through the canal. So, yeah, it's significant. It actually impacts our economy as well as our security.
I know that Jimmy Carter, or President Carter, brokered a deal with Panama that, in 1979 to give it to them for $1, but the transfer of power didn't happen until 1999. Is Trump right when he says that China, though, is running the show there?
I think increasingly that's very true, but when it comes to just specifically the canal itself, it's not a new problem. It goes back to Obama's years. The purchases by Chinese-controlled operators, port operators on both sides of the canal, means they effectively control and can actually constrain what goes through and how fast it goes through the canal. And of course, there's the political power and influence they have in Panama. That's, I think, the bigger concern in what you're hearing in President Trump's comments that he's alluding to. Do
you think, though, that, it's $3 billion to fix the problems that are there now Are other countries that use the canal going to come forward and help financially?
I see no reason that they would be compelled to. They pay a fee to go through. The United States, with our history and the terms that we have access and some influence over what happens in the canal area, that's the price that Carter kind of signed us up for. It's not a good deal, never was a good deal. And I think we're starting to see the dangers of that strategic decision that was made back in the late 70s.
Yeah, I've been during the break looking up Greenland, and they have a lot of rare earth minerals. And currently, we rely on China for a lot of these rare earth minerals. Do you think controlling Greenland would that strengthen America's industrial base and reduce our independence on China for these critical materials?
Well, there's two things going on up in Greenland. One, its geographic position is very dangerous to our national security if the Chinese were to have a persistent presence, let alone the Russians. And that was one of the concerns in the Cold War, that the Soviets might be able to get a presence there. Of course, it was a very different dynamic with the Chinese and their ability to kind of weasel their way in through economic inducements the Soviets never had. On the natural resources side, it's very expensive to get them out of there because you've got the ice, the weather, and everything. Yeah. But what they do have a lot, they do have a lot of uranium. They do have zinc. They have copper. The rare earth minerals, they're really hard to process. So if you did it up in Greenland where there's not a lot of people and you can control the extent of all the secondary type products that are very hazardous you produce in that process, it makes a lot of sense. So strategically, Greenland is important to the United States.
Donald Trump Jr. just happened to tour Greenland yesterday. What do you think that was all about?
I think that was signaling, but also information gathering. It's been decades now. The folks that live in Greenland have a contentious relationship with their mother country in Denmark. And Denmark hasn't really shown a whole lot of strength against the Chinese. They're a shipping country, and they do a lot of business with the Chinese. And the demonstration most recently where they let the Chinese tanker that severed several undersea cables and pipelines between Lithuania and Finland back in November, they let it go. A deal they brokered to have the Chinese inspectors come on board to kind of oversee, but then nothing occurred. Ship left. So a Chinese ship doing the bidding of the Russians, severing undersea cables that are important for NATO allies. We have some other problems and concerns that we need to raise with the Danish government.
What about our good friends up north? I don't want two liberal senators from Canada. Do you?
No.
We make it the 51st state.
Yeah, it might actually be a couple of states. There's a possibility there, and I think a lot of Canadians are fed up with their government. They've had a lot longer Biden-esque kind of experience than we did, and so I can understand the frustrations up there, and I hear from my Canadian friends. It's really a decision, like Greenland. It's a decision up to the Canadians to figure out how they solve it, and I think it's healthy that the United States under President Trump is saying, "Hey, we're willing to get engaged. We have an offer. Would you like to take it?"
You hear people saying, "This is imperialism. Trump is an imperialist." Is this a return of the Monroe Doctrine?
Yeah, no. It sounds like it. Those that have always wanted kind of like the detractors of Trump will try to make it into something like the military angle in the earlier part. I listened to the presser and the questions. It's not going to be like a military intervention. We fought during the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812 in Canada, and never since has that ever even entered into the thought calculations, nor should it. It's not necessary. Yeah. The Canadians, the U.S., we have so much common interest. If they decide to just throw away the border and basically embrace the reality, so be it. I think it can be done best that way. There's no need to go down that military angle. And the same with Greenland. Folks in Greenland.
If we take back the canal, what do you think China's reaction would be? What would be?
Do we want to take back the canal?
Well, that's basically what Trump wants the canal.
That's true.
Yeah. There's a couple ways to skin this cat. Buying out the Chinese-owned ports is one way, or enabling a consortium of allied countries to buy out the Chinese. That's one way to do it. But I think, the only way you're really going to assure that the canal is going to be safe and easy access if our economy and our nation needs it for security reasons, we've got to have a military presence back there. And we had bases, we had a presence. Doesn't have to be significant, but that's probably the ultimate guarantor that no one can use insidious or backhanded ways to try to constrict in peacetime or to sever or damage the flow through the canal in a war.
When you look at China, Russia, and their influence, in especially China and Panama and China and Russia as it relates to the Greenland area, what does it say about the ineffectiveness of the leadership of Barack Obama and Joe Biden, that they've been able to encroach upon us in so many different areas as it relates to a foreign threat?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is I think thankfully we're finally about, this is something I've been agitating for about 15 years. And in just the last, I'd say 2 years, you finally have a China consensus that China is not a potential partner. It's a threat on every category of national power and national interest. And the Biden administration came in trying to roll the clock back to friendlier days, and they were basically, the door was slammed in their face. And so thankfully we're at a consensus. We're late to coming to it, but the reason that we're where we are now is we all assumed, and this is a bipartisan, multi-branches of the government for far too long, that China, if only their economy grew, they would become more like us. And that's a gross misunderstanding of Chinese history, Chinese culture, and more importantly, a complete misunderstanding and mischaracterization of what Marxist, Leninist, and Maoist governance is like.
All right, real quick, wanted to ask you about Gulf of Mexico being changed to Gulf of America. Does he have the power to do that?
I mean, the United States can clearly make a petition and start calling it that in all our maps and charts. Other countries do it, like South Korea calls, it's not the Sea of Japan, it's the Eastern Sea. The Philippines, now it's not the South China Sea, it's the Western Sea. So, and of course, we've never changed like the Philippine Sea or the Sea of Japan on our charts. We don't take sides, but countries have that ability. Whether or not it becomes the accepted norm is another question.
What do you think President Trump's going to do on day one in office?
There's so many things. He's going to be very busy. What's clear this time around, and the benefit of having been in office for 4 years before, is he knows what he's dealing with. He knows how important the first 24 hours are going to be to get the momentum going. So I'm very confident you're going to see a lot of very good things and that are thought through. And you got some of that came out over the summertime as the campaign was rolling, but I'm very excited about what's coming.
All right. John, are you good?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Brent, so much great information. We're so glad we had you on. We'd love to have you back. Senior Research Fellow for Naval Warfare and Advanced Technology for the Heritage Foundation. You can follow him on X at Brent Sadler, BRENT. Then the letter